But I'd first like to thank, when I first came across him, Councillor Jim McVeigh, when...
Ex-Councillor.
Nobody's perfect. So, because we invited Colonel Ann Wright, who's an active member of the Americans Veterans for Peace. And so that was my first introduction to Jim. And I'm very pleased he asked me to come and talk here. And I'm particularly pleased that you're all here as well, because who the hell is this guy called Roger Cole from Dublin we never heard of before? But I'll get straight to the point. I've been involved in politics for some time now. And in 1996 we established the Peace and Neutrality Alliance. I have some material here, it's free, you can take it. But I'll just go through it here. One is we reprinted Wolfe Tone's document. There was going to be a war in 1790 between the Spanish and British empires over a bit of territory in America, and Tone put the case that Ireland should be independent and neutral. He was the first person that I've come across who actually argued in favour of Irish neutrality and linked it with independence. And that was actually reprinted by Cumann na Gael in 1915. So it was remembered long after it was published in 1790. And then there's another booklet there about the foundation of the Irish Neutrality League, which was established by James Connolly. And basically it was a broad alliance bringing together the Connolly tradition and the Republican tradition. And it was the first really public event where all that happened. They got on to other activities obviously later, but nevertheless that was the first, again, linking the whole idea of Ireland being both independent and neutral. They're not separate, they're joined at the hip. I have other documents there more recently talking about the process of the militarisation of the European Union and the use of Shannon Airport by the Americans. Millions of US troops have landed in Shannon Airport. They're currently landing in Shannon Airport on their way to Eastern Europe, bringing weapons, because they're never searched, so they guarantee you they're carrying weapons, and men over to take part in what might or might not happen. Then we have also built up lots of contacts in Europe, and not just America, but quite extensively in Europe. And there's another booklet there called the Militarised Union, which is another analysis of the process of what's happening with the European Union. And it's definitely worth having, if you're interested in that, that's a really good book. And it's worth having a nick at it and reading all about it, because it's a big issue for PADA, it's a big issue for people, for anybody interested in that whole topic. So some of that, what I was saying, is already, the other thing is already in my speech. It's already there about the book, the pamphlet. It was very successful, by the way, that Tone wrote in 1790. It made him a name in Dublin at the time, because it wasn't Google, it wasn't Facebook, it was pamphlets. That's how you became known in 1790, and very readable as that. So I suppose a quote, appropriately enough, with James Connolly, and you all know this quote: "Such a scheme, that is the partition of Ireland agreed by Redmond, means the betrayal of a national democracy of industrial lustre, would mean a carnivalry of reaction both north and south, and would set back the wheels of progress and would destroy an oncoming unity of Irish labour movement and paralyse all advanced movements while it endures." I think a reasonably decent prediction of what would happen in the event of the partition of our country. It was obviously the decision of the Unionists and the Home Rule parties in 1914-18 that brought together the Connolly tradition and the IRB in the formation of the Irish Neutrality League and the war and 1916 and all of that period of war of independence. And the fact that Connolly made that whole issue of neutrality league again is following the example of Tone in linking the two. I mean, they're deeply rooted, going back hundreds of years now at this stage. Now, when the government, the Republican government, was negotiating with the British Empire, you frequently hear, the only thing you hear about is, the treaty that was signed. But of course, during the process of negotiations, the representatives of the Irish government and the representatives of the British Empire produced papers and had them as a basis for discussion and debate. And one of them was produced by the Irish government, and I can read it. The Ireland consents to be a neutral state, and the British Commonwealth guarantees perpetual neutrality of Ireland and the integrity and inviolability of Irish territory. Ireland undertakes, both in the interest of the Irish people and in friendly regard to the strategic interests of the British Commonwealth, to enter into no compact and to take no action with, nor permit any action to be taken inconsistent with the obligations of preserving neutrality, integrity and inviolability of Ireland, and repel with force any attempt to violate Irish territory or use Irish territory waters for warlike purposes. So the deal was, if you agree to unite with Ireland, we'll agree to neutrality and we'll make certain our part of our country will not be used to attack you. That was the core of the argument there. That's Article 3, Draft A, Article 5 of Draft B treaty proposals, taken by the delegation of London on the 17th of the 10th, 1921. So that's a key point, that even then there were serious considerations of, you can't just declare yourself to be neutral, you have to promise the British you will not allow your territory to be used to attack you. Now, of course, everybody knows that didn't happen. We were partitioned and all the rest. I'm not going to go through that. And of course, this part of Ireland not only stayed part of Britain, but from April 4, 1949 became an integral part of NATO, and remains part of NATO, a nuclear armed military alliance committed to using nuclear weapons as a first strike weapon. So it's a very different, as we'll talk about a bit later about what's going on now. Remember that, right? NATO is legally committed within its agreements to go and have a nuclear war first strike, and they've got lots and lots of nuclear weapons. So currently, for example, the UK remains committed to war and has a massively increased, the current government in power, the guy who has a tendency to have parties and lie, you might have heard him. So he made a commitment. It's going to spend, in 2019 to 2020, it spent 22.1 billion, that's 2% of its GDP. And it's going to increase its military expenditure from then on. It intends to increase nuclear warheads from 180 to 260, with a massive 15 to 30 billion development costs, as well as production costs. So you're talking about a lot of money to develop an even more powerful nuclear arsenal than they had before they came to power. There is, for example, constant talk about, what would happen? How would Ireland be united? Well, of course, what happens when they talk about the cost to Ireland for Irish unity? If Ireland stayed neutral, and if all of Ireland became neutral, the expenditure is somewhat different when you think of our expenditure currently is little over 1 billion a year, right, which is 0.3% of our GDP. It's tiny compared to the 2%. And then, of course, when you're talking about the cost, that's a direct cost. Northern Ireland pays towards the overall cost of UK military expenditure. So it's quite different when you're just talking about purely Northern Ireland. So that cost wouldn't exist if you stay neutral. Now, of course, if we join the South, there are people, as you well know at this stage, very prominent people wanting to join NATO, advocating joining NATO. It isn't just the unionists who like nuclear weapons. It's a lot of growing and influential group of people in the 2670s. And John Doyle of DCU wrote a very good analysis of this whole issue in terms of what it would cost Ireland. And that's a key part of his analysis. There wouldn't go anywhere near the kind of money to have united Ireland if the military costs was the same percentage as it currently is down in the South. It's way cheaper. So in other words, achieving a united Ireland, it's crucial that you argue in favour of all Ireland neutrality. And if you don't say that, well then you're either messing around or you're not, and you're certainly no Connolly socialist. In short, it would have a much lower defence budget and make it much easier to fund an all-Ireland national health system, because that's one of the issues I'm sure you have down here in North. You know, you've got a reasonably decent NHS compared to the health system down in the south. And now, I think so that's, if you like, the basis of what's going on. And if I like then turn to another core issue when we're talking about Irish neutrality, and that is the European Union. But before we joined the European Union, De Valera made a large number of statements in the Dáil about defending Irish neutrality, because he was definitely in favour of Irish neutrality all his life. He claimed at one stage that he was the last president of an independent Ireland. The way things are going, not be said that, but he gave the reason on the 12th of July 1955 in Dáil Éireann. De Valera made the following quote, right? Quote, "A small nation has to be extremely cautious when it's entering into an alliance which brings it willy-nilly into those wars. We would not be consulted in how a war should be started. The great powers would decide that. And when it ended, no matter who won, we would not be consulted as to the terms in which that war ended." And that's as valid now as it was in 1955. When in 1986, Raymond Crotty brought a case against the state for having a referendum, for not having a referendum on an article that was going through the Dáil about another of these Single European Act, it was called at the time, you know, into its process of integration into the European Union. And what the Supreme Court in Ireland decided was, according to Article 6 of our Constitution that exists in 26 counties, stated that all power, Article 6 is all power derives from the people. Which is completely different to England, where the Queen is the sovereign. She's lent the power to the Parliament. Power comes from the people on its way up to the rulers. And what the Supreme Court said, you can't do this. You can't transfer power away from the Irish people and give it to the European Union without first having a referendum. So we're the only country, as far as I know, in anywhere in Europe that has a legal obligation to have a referendum before you transfer that power away and give it off to Europe. And don't forget, when we joined the European Union, they said, oh, this is not going to, the government policy statement on our entry into the European Union clearly stated that this wouldn't affect Irish neutrality. They obviously had a sense of humour, but nevertheless, that's what they said at the time. And obviously what's been happening ever since then is one treaty after the other, where increasingly more and more port power is transferred away from the actual people living in the 26 counties, and obviously here as well, in part of Britain, towards the EU and its institutions. And one of the concessions we did win, because we fought and won two referendums, the Nice referendum, we weren't really part of it. It wasn't Pada who did it, like there was lots of other people as well. But there was a victory where, in two separate occasions, we won the first Nice referendum, and we also won the first Lisbon referendum. And one of the concessions we got was that it's in the legal system at the moment. The Irish Army can't be deployed abroad without the consent of the Dáil Éireann, the government, and the United Nations. Now that was a clear victory for the Peace and Neutrality Alliance, because it's obviously purely connected with PAN, because PAN only focused on the whole military dimension. Especially when they said the United Nations would have to agree to it as well. So that was a major achievement by all those people involved in PAN and other peace groups that campaigned on that issue. And it'd be very difficult. And obviously, so therefore the things what PAN would want in any united Ireland was that particular law stays there, and also that the Article 6 of the existing constitution would stay there, right? You know, there's all these people talking about, oh, we have United Ireland, we have to have a new constitution. I don't go along with that at all. There's an awful lot that's quite good in the existing constitution and can be amended. But get rid of that, and I'm damn certain the Irish Times, the Irish Independent, RTE, and all the rest of them would want that particular clause to go. You know, imagine the Irish people being the people from whom power derives. So those people don't believe that at all. It believes that it belongs to RTE, it belongs to the Irish Times, it belongs to all the people of all this influence. So that was a key achievement of that particular constitution. Now, in Ireland, I don't know how much you know of the differences between what's going on in the South, but when the government decided to say we're a neutral country, but at the same time we're going to be a US aircraft carrier, it was a bit of a problem. Because international law is very clear in the Hague Convention of 1907. A neutral country has responsibilities, and it's a core part of international law. And what it said was that you can't allow troops engaged in wars to go through your territory. And our international secretary is an ex-officer of the Irish Defence Forces, and he brought a case to the courts. And what the court decided, the judge of the court, right? What he said was, I absolutely accept that the Hague Convention of 1907 does define in international law what a neutral state should or shouldn't do. However, it's not in the Constitution. It's not specifically that law isn't in the Constitution, and also it's not in any domestic law. So if the government wants to end neutrality, I'm just a judge, right? I can't stop that. So I have to find you not victorious in this claim that what you're asking for is state harbor, right? In other words, and of course, when we were, that particular court case happened in 2003, which is why in 1996, when PANA was established, that we sought, it was our first objective, right? That a constitution be put, an amendment to the constitution would be put into the constitution to ensure that Ireland was in accord with international law and was a neutral state. And that particular law, on two separate occasions, has been put forward by Sinn Féin. And on the first occasion, it had the support of a number of smaller parties, and it didn't win because they didn't have a majority, and they did it a second time as well. And again, they didn't win, right? But it shows you that, as far as I can see, apart from a number of individual TDs, every other party now, in the actual party in the Dáil, I'm willing to be wrong about that because the Social Democrats are relatively new, but most parties in Ireland at one stage or other have voted against any bill being put into the Constitution. So Sinn Féin is the only one who didn't. I understand that the current minister, the current Sinn Féin spokesman on foreign policy, said in the Dáil recently that there should be an amendment to the Constitution to enshrine Irish neutrality into the Constitution. So if anybody of you know him, because anyway, I'll talk about that later privately over time, that this would be a good idea to do that now rather than wait, especially in view of what's happening in the world now. So the phrase they came up with, this is the part of the foreign officer, the Department of Foreign Affairs, or whoever came up with it, I never actually discovered who actually came up with it, but this difference between what they call military neutrality and active neutrality and neutrality, right? Because the government, when they formed their government, they used to call it a military neutrality, now they call it active military neutrality. I still don't even know what they mean, right? But they certainly don't mean neutrality. And I use this phrase from Alice in Wonderland, I'm sure you've heard it. When I use a word, Humpty Dumpty said in a rather scornful tone, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. The question is, said Alice, whether you can make words mean so many different things. The question is, said Humpty Dumpty, is who is to be master, that's all. And that's what this is all about, coming up with this silly phrase called military neutrality. They don't think like us at all. I don't know how many of you remember the 1916 celebration that was happening in 2016. They decided, this is a communist, I'm sure you all know this, so I apologise for those who know it already, but they decided to celebrate the 1916 Rising by producing a 4-minute video. I think it was about 30 seconds on the 1916 Rising, and the rest was a Bord Fáilte holiday opportunity to come and visit Ireland. They couldn't even mention this place for all I know. And that was it. That's their commitment to the idea of an independent Irish Republic. And of course, the whole issue of the use of Shannon Airport, which I mentioned, I could go on about Shannon Airport forever, but there's the pamphlets over there, you can read that instead, right? So that's where this actually, look, it's we'll decide what neutrality is, because it really doesn't mean anything, and we can completely destroy international law and just nobody cares very much, right? Now, to be fair, Ed Horgan and his people organised a protest at Shannon Airport once a month, right? And we're now doing it as well outside the Dáil, and I've been down to Shannon, because you kind of feel it, but you know, they just never gave up. It's hard with these people, you know, who never actually stop believing what they should believe in, you know, even though they're getting on a bit. So, what you then have is what's happening now, and I can quote again Emmanuel Macron, President of France, right? On the 7th of the 11th, 2018, quote, "We need a true European army to protect the continent with respect to China, Russia, and even the United States," right? So here's this guy saying, I'm going to take on everybody. I know France is a bit on the arrogant side, you know. But also John Hume made a phrase, right? I think in 1998 when he got the Nobel Peace Prize. He said, "The EU philosophy is a philosophy of real peace. We should be sending that message, not armies abroad." So that's completely different than what Macron said, right? It's like completely alternate views of what the European Union is about. The problem is, all the evidence is not on the same side as John Hume. All the evidence is the exact opposite, and that book goes into quite some detail about the nature of what is actually happening as distinct from a dream world. Now, for example, between 2014 and 2020, the EU provided 590 million funding to the EU military via different various programs, right? This is now completely overshadowed by the Military and Research and Development Programme from 2021 to 2027, where they were allocated 7.9 billion. So that's something of a major increase from 590 million to 7.9 billion. That's not making that more cups of tea for anybody, right? That's really serious money. And that's only, I'm sure, just the beginning. You know, next time round they'll be spending even more, right? So the current leadership there is a division, to be honest, between the American empire and its control over NATO and also the European leaders. And there is this feeling, you know, that we don't really want to become vassals of the American empire. And there is a division there, separate from what I'm arguing. You know, there's a number of different divisions in that process. But the leadership of the 26 counties, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, the Green Party, the Irish Times, virtually every media I can think of, is that during the last EU referendum, the EU elections to the EU Parliament, there was actually a level of debate on the issue. It doesn't happen very often. But there was. And what RTE decided to do, in the clear hope that the number of people, you see, PAN has organised previous referendums, and usually it's about 78% of people support Irish neutrality. They thought that after this debate, and after all these very clever people from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and elsewhere, that the figure would go down from 78. You know, not unreasonable, you know. They had a problem. The actual result showed that 82% of Irish people supported Irish neutrality in all its consequences. In other words, once there actually is a debate, once there actually is a discussion on the issue of Irish neutrality, on the issue of Irish independence, the figures don't go down, they go up. So that's a big problem for them. You know, that's what the hell are we going to do with these people? You know, why can't we just sort of basically, you know, do away with the people altogether, because they're absolutely think they don't agree with what we say. And that's quite well established. I don't know how many of you have been, I know I'm talking about it later, but I mean, anybody who lives in Dublin, the entire media, they only ever have people on advocating one side, right? I mean, I might not be the best guy in the world, but I can certainly talk about neutrality at the drop of a hat quite easily. And I talk about all this stuff, and they should have people. I'm not the only one there, there's loads of people who are actually involved in defending and advocating Irish neutrality and Irish independence. Have us on? They used to, by the way. Like, Pan opposed the war on Afghanistan, and they rang me up. They said, would you write an article because you're not in favour? I said, yeah, and I did, and they published it, and they paid me. But that was 20 years ago. That was a long time ago. They don't do that any longer. You know, they don't ring it, you know, so we must be getting good. That's my interpretation of what's happening. So, what I'm basically arguing is that there is a sustained attack on the issue of Irish neutrality by a large number of people. It's not a handful. And in particular, I want to talk about an organisation called the Institute for International and European Affairs. They were founded after Crotty won his Supreme Court judgment, where they said they had to have a referendum. Because don't forget, they decided that on the basis of foreign policy, wasn't other issues. And they have now, and have for some time, a minor little income, annual income. Any guesses how much a year they make? Income? State bodies? Private companies? The main organisation behind all this stock policy. It's $1 million a year. We have a huge amount of money. We have an income of $6,000 a year. Now, money does talk, and that's a real indication. You know, if I meet somebody advocating neutrality, I might buy them a cup of tea. They will give them lots of cups of tea, and lots of little presents, and lots of this and everything to get them on side. And that's a difference, a major difference between those people advocating neutrality and those advocating its destruction. Money, big money. I'm going to finish now with a little mention of this other little matter that's going on. One of the things I enjoyed when I was asked to come up here was the image, right? Neither king nor Kaiser, but Ireland. Because that's the core of Irish neutrality. We believe in Irish independence, Irish neutrality, and not get involved in imperial wars. Because what the 1914-18 war was about, as everybody knows, was an inter-imperial war between one lot of imperials and another lot of imperials, armies. And in that situation, Connolly and others argued we should be neutral. And as I said, the position continued on in negotiations. And what's happening now is another inter-imperial war. You know what I mean? I don't think, for example, that nobody's Nirvana on one side or the other, but this is clearly a decision by the Russian state that says you're putting missiles, or planning to put missiles on the border with us that can reach Moscow in 7 minutes. That would completely destroy all of Moscow. And because that's only 7 minutes, we wouldn't be in a position to react, right? So we'd all be dead, and we couldn't have done anything, right? And so we can't put up with that any longer. And this has been going on for months and months and months and months. And then what's happened lately? He put the army up. He's basically saying we're going to do this unless you come to the table and negotiate common security between us, right? The kind of situation that used to happen when the Soviet Union existed. They did negotiate, they did deals. In order not to have a nuclear weapon. You could argue Kennedy was quite happy when the deal was done with Cuba to take the military weapons out of Cuba that could hit parts of America in a short space of time. But we're not going to do it. we're going to put weapons right up against your border and we're not going to change. So you're putting pressure on the Russians not to negotiate. And I think that's what's happening. And where it's all going to end, I have no idea. But you never hear that bit of it, right? You never hear that bit of it. The only first person I met who writes a regular article in a newspaper was Vincent O'Toole. I don't know if you saw it, was published in last Saturday's Irish Times. It's the only day I buy it because it's a good TV guy. And I was very surprised, and pleasantly surprised, because he would be quite well known. You know, he's a nice liberal, and no, liberals aren't that bad. But he said that. Completely different from everything else in the Irish Times. You know, they mustn't like him very much. You know what I mean? You can try the cause, you know. I can't be a period like the rest of us, not fair. So that's the core of why we should be neutral. Like, you know, we're not in the business of supporting imperial powers fighting each other. That was the argument in 1480 when the Neutrality League was established, and it's our argument today. And one of the reasons why you've never heard of Roger Cole, maybe you haven't heard of Pana, that's the reason. They don't want people to make these kind of arguments, to make these discussions. Because people might change their mind and think, yeah, we don't want to get away, we don't get involved in this either. 82% is not a bad start. But it's the nature of the control of ownership of power in terms of media that makes the difference. You know? So that's the reason I appreciate being invited to come talk to yourselves. Excellent.
Thank you. Ukraine. So, plenty there to focus on. Is there anything anybody wants to ask about at this stage? We always need somebody to start us off.
Roger, thanks very much. That was very informative and very interesting. In terms of the sort of big massive cry we've seen about the Russians off the coast a wee while ago, there, a fortnight or 3 or 4 weeks ago, the outcry, how hypocritical is it that we're now on the UN Security Council and we can't come out and properly condemn what's happening in Palestine? Do you think that that's in any way related to our neutrality, or do you think it's that specifically Palestine, they don't have the spine to come out and call it out? The current Irish government.
Well, a lot of people would argue that that Israel actually isn't an independent state, it's just a rather large US aircraft carrier. That Israel wouldn't exist if it wasn't funded by the United States. I mean, the amount of money they get these weapons, massive amounts of weapons from the US arms industry, which owns and controls the Senate and the Congress. I mean, you can't really get elected. I mean, some handful do, right? But by and large, you'll never get elected to any position in the United States Senate or Congress or become president unless you actually support Israel, because you're supporting your aircraft carrier in the Middle East. The only aircraft carrier is in the Middle East that's armed with nuclear weapons. And it could be said that the massive demonstrations and the massive support that exists for Palestinians is because a lot of Irish people can understand why, because like Ireland, it was invaded, conquered, occupied and colonised. So there's a level of understanding. Not among those who did the colonising, mostly by the generally speaking, you know, they think it's round. And the people who run the South, they have stopped believing in the United Ireland. They have stopped believing in a neutral Ireland. They want to be a region of a European empire, like they were when we were in the British Union. They're home rulers, essentially. You know, I mean, they're born again Rebellites, if you like. Mm-hmm. And that's what they are, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and the Green Party. Like the Green Party has just been joined by several reasonable number of ex-army officers who are bitterly opposed to Irish neutrality and joined the Green Party, and they're strongly influencing our policy. This is all planned. It wasn't happened by accident. None of this happened by accident. Because they want to accelerate the thing.
But there's enormous support for Palestinians, I'm sure, up here among the sizable sections of the population, and there's substantial support, and good support. I mean, the Irish Palestinian Solidarity Campaign are the ones that they do tremendous work. I mean, there's a tremendous campaign. I don't know if you were in Dublin last time, they were bombing Gaza. I mean, it was a massive turnout, and the government was forced to change its policy. You want to, but it just like Jesus, you know, or better touch. You know, but that's what they are. Like, they didn't want to celebrate the 1916 Rising. So why have heard of the people who didn't want to celebrate the 1916 Rising support the Palestinians? You know what I mean? So, but that's the reason why I think the establishment doesn't like it, not because they're. I mean, I don't think. I met some of these politicians. They don't really like all the Palestinians being killed. You know, they're not nasty, evil people. You know what I mean? I mean, people. I've met a lot of politicians that feel Fáil and Fine Gael and everywhere. And, you know, they just no, we can't do this. You know, we have to do what the Americans tell us, and that's part of it. You know, it's like allowing challenge to be used. It's part of the same thought process. They're scared shitless of the Americans. Like nearly 50% of the tax take is by American corporations invested in the 26 countries. So it isn't, you know, it isn't purely we like people being killed. They're scared shitless. Oh, that they'd be next.
Yeah.
I remember, I think Deglon there showed me a little portrait of, what was the name of that? Some Tory organisation it was produced a while back where they had Ireland was Cuba. You know, we're the next Cuba. And I can remember that year when, you know, so that's the problem. Is that a correct reasonable answer?
Yeah, the first time I ever heard neutrality being discussed at the New Ireland talks was the talk held by Ireland's Future in Galway, which was about 4 or 5 months ago. And it just fascinated me that it hadn't come up until now. That was the first that I'd heard it being spoken about in a public forum, and I think maybe perhaps that needs to be more in the fore of the conversation as we move forward with these negotiations, or what our vision of the New Ireland is. That needs to be front and centre of the conversation, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, that's, as I said, the money. Surely from the money angle, it's an awful lot cheaper to be neutral than it is part of NATO.
I think it was actually mentioned about your man Graham Gudgeon had come up with the cost of a New Ireland, and whoever it was brought it up that night in Galway actually debunked his claims by talking about cutting the military budget right away, or the cost or expenditure.
Roger, can I ask you see, whenever you look at one of the things that's always been said about the Irish is that they were very fond of fighting for Britain. You know, they fought British wars all over the world, and I'm just wondering what sort of numbers of people who live in the southern part of Ireland are still involved with the British Army. You know, how many of them, you know, get involved?
I think the number of people joining the British Army from the Republic of Ireland is quite low.
Is it?
Yes, I don't think it's that high. We have problems with the number of Irish people joining the Irish Army, because basically people who join armies don't get paid that much anywhere. You're not, it's not a well-paid job compared to other jobs you can get, and there's a big problem. I mean, we have an official, the Defence Forces has the official target to have about 10,000, and it's down to about 8. Now, in those figures, I don't remember the top of my head. Simply because they can't live. I mean, you've got inflation. Imagine now you're going to have 10, maybe with this war going on, inflation has been 5%. It could go up to 20%. There could be a massive increase in inflation. And the soldiers in the state army down south, they're going to be even poorer. But we must impose sanctions. We must do all this sort of carry on, and we must take sides. You know what I mean? Now, I think it would still happen. You'd still be affected whether you took side or not, to be honest. You know what I mean? But it is an indication that it isn't just. I mean, I've read stories about the Germans having problems getting Germans to join the German army. In fact, that's one of the idea of the European Union. You know what I mean? That no matter if you're in the European Union, no matter what country you're in, you can join the Irish army, or the German army, or the French army. You know what I mean? And as you know, it's a
Yeah,
lot.
the European army then.
That's the overall strategy, yeah, to have a European army, and of course, if you're in a state that's in a European army, you can join. That's beginning already. I mean, Germans, I think, are already saying if you're from Bulgaria, it's in the European Union. No, and because there's huge differences in income. You know, like if you come to Dublin, you know, I think myself and a few friends went to Bulgaria, and the place was packed. You know, with people. Well, Bulgarians going home for a weekend or whatever, right? So there's a lot of, I mean, roughly 17% of the population of Dublin now are Irish. I mean, they come from mostly other European states. And the reason they come to Ireland, or did come to Ireland, right, is because they make more money. You know, there might be lots of them living, sharing a house together, right, or sharing something. Their income, their outlays low, and they make money. No, Irish people should know that. Anybody know that about Irish history and Irish people emigrating? You know what I mean? Being poor and they share houses, they share hovels together in order not to spend money, make money. It's new about that goes on everywhere.
Go ahead.
To carry on the same theme, what frightens the life out of me, not necessarily myself, but for my children, is the fact of our European army. My grandchildren, I fear for them, and neutrality is out the window now. It's completely gone. I would commonly said it was better to die beneath an Irish sky than to fight an imperial war. And we've joined a Europe that is getting towards very much imperialism, and imperialism needs protection, and protection is armies. And whether they're Irish armies, English armies, or whatever the case may be, members of the European army. That frightens, and I think we should be concentrating on my grandchildren and other grandchildren, people in this room who are of an age, to tell them about their future and how it's been contaminated by this country, by what we're living in. Would you allay my fears?
No, it's touch and go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, you know, okay, we won 2 referendums, but they had the same referendum, and it's that small amendment, which is quite an achievement, by the way. I wouldn't underestimate. But you know, there is a possible war happening that will kill everybody, not just you, not just your grandparents, but everybody in a nuclear war, because both Russia and NATO are armed to their teeth with nuclear weapons, and they're all dead. So if you want me to say that won't happen, I'm not going to say that. You know, it's not true. But the only way it can be stopped is that. That's why we have links with peace movements all over the world. You know, primarily in America, to be honest. We've developed very good contacts in America and good contacts in Europe and in England. You know what I mean? We do have people. But like, I mean, our income per annum is a split second of the amount of money that the arms industry has as an income. They pay a lot of politicians a lot of money. A lot of politicians do it for the money. I don't know if you know that. You know what I mean? You know, when you do, I'm only joking. I'm well aware that you know. So it's a big problem. You know, and I see this is not necessarily an issue that's well debated even here. You know what I mean? Because it's just not debated. No, it's not debated, and you are definitely no doubt about it. You were effectively excluded from, you know, the main media in the south is the
in the north, you have this. Different sort of relationship that the unionism has with the British Army. It is really scary in terms of how they view, particularly working class unionists, the way that they view you, and really, like they honour the British Army, and in fact, I remember. One of the, I was talking to one of the council officials in City Hall a couple of years ago, and I was saying to him about, why do all these young people on the Newton Ards Road and the Shackle, why are they all into the British Army? And not even actually joining the British Army, but why did they hold it in such high esteem? And he said to me, well, to a large extent it's a new shipyard. And that working class unionist kids, they want a job, they've no educational background, no trade, right? They'll go and join one of the forces. So
They actually hold armed forces days in the schools, don't they?
Yeah.
Some of them.
yeah, and the British Army actually recruit in all the schools in unionist areas. Go ahead, Jim.
No, I remember when I was a fair bit younger, Roger was receiving some of your literature way back in the day when we were in the H blocks, and reading some of the stuff you were posting up, literally would have been in the 1980s and in the 90s. And it seems obvious to me, and we've briefly talked about this, that you're right, this whole issue of neutrality isn't as prominent as it might have been at different periods. Even, I mean, you said yourself, you've constantly had to battle and to fight to get the issue raised as all, or addressed or discussed. That's the question I want to ask, maybe just for us all. How do we turn that around? How do we, I mean, for example, you just mentioned Ireland's future. There's this debate that's beginning about a new Ireland, you know, the possibility of a new Ireland, a very different Ireland. I'm involved in a group called Trade Unions for a New and a United Ireland. Yeah? And we formed that to try and ensure that the debate about Irish unity wasn't just about the geographical change, but it had to be about radical social and economic change as well, and what that might look like. But when you think about this issue of neutrality, it hasn't penetrated in that debate yet, you know, for example. And it should, and it could, and I mean, there's no reason why, I just want to make one practical suggestion, there's no reason why, you know, people like yourself, with the support of people like me, couldn't approach Ireland's future and say, well, why, not why, that should be part of the debate. That your voice and people like you who have a starting record and a wealth of knowledge about this matter should be on those platforms. So there's a practical thing. You know, you're sitting here and there's a dozen or 20 that's here tonight, and people will watch it on the social media platforms. But some of these debates that Ireland's future having are hundreds of people, thousands of people. I think they're planning a huge one, isn't there?
10,000.
Where's that to be? Is
Limerick or
that
something?
No, it's in Dublin. It's
Dublin.
Yeah.
So I just, and it's not even so much for yourself. You get this shout, like, you have ideas, but it's for everybody here. How do we move that? I'm sure it's never been centre stage, of course, but how do we get it into a broader discussion with people, where more people are thinking about and talking about what Irish neutrality might look like, either this side of partition Ireland or post-partition Ireland. How do we do that? I think that's very important, and I think one of the things we could do is try and get this issue and your voice and people like you into that debate. You know, because there's a platform, they have some money behind them, and that's a practical way. You know, we should be trying to ensure that you and people like you are on the next platform and are raising this matter and talking about this matter. But that's only one thing, and you know, I mentioned getting the stuff from yourself because that's 30 years ago. You know, and you're still at it, fair play to you, and you fit along along for your age. But you and I, and you know, I might be a little bit younger than yourself, right?
Definitely.
Aren't going to be around forever, right? So how do we bring in a new generation of young Irish people into PANA, and how do we re-energise it and get other people involved? Those are the type of things I think we need to.
Well, I read the document of United. I mean, I'm sure you went to that particular union group you're talking about United Ireland. I don't think it mentioned neutrality at all in the pamphlet I read.
Yeah.
Itself.
Yeah.
Now, this is put together by extremely progressive people,
Yeah.
by and large, but even they don't see it as a
Yeah.
core issue. That's why that article by Judd Doyle, I don't have it with me, but I can send it to you. You'll have the document. You can actually read his actual document. It's just not talked about very much. It's difficult because it might be more topical now. I mean, you didn't know that a possible world war that would end all human life on the planet might be happening. That now would be not a bad idea to interview me on RTE or Ed Horgan or somebody else, right? But that's assuming RTE and the Irish Times and all the rest of them are in favour of neutrality. They're not. They hate it. They want it. They all the time. They want to be part of a European army in a European empire. You know, at the best, or actually join NATO. There's a guy called O'Brien, very very senior journalist, was interviewed on you. I don't think you don't get news talk down here, do you?
You can get it, but it's not that popular.
No, well, it'd be reasonably popular in 26th century, especially.
And we've got Stephen Nolan.
We all have crosses to bear. He interviewed, this guy comes out and says, we join NATO, right? In other words, like they're putting their foot in the water, you see, can we actually join a nuclear armed military alliance? You know what I mean? And we're seeing the response. So your man Kenny, you've heard of him, he's Pat Kenny, he's a well-known journalist. He gives him half an hour, a long time. So I sent an email and said, interesting here, would you like to hear an alternative perspective? You know, we've been around since 1996, we know quite a lot about neutrality. Nothing, absolutely no response whatsoever. Right? I didn't die shocked, you know what I mean? With hearing that. Because it is a problem. If one side has an income of one organisation campaigning to destroy Irish neutrality has $1 million income a year, sorry, $1 million, there's a lot of money. And what we have at 10,000 or 5,000, no. And that's because a lot of people who are progressive don't talk about it either, such as that organisation you mentioned. And it really is up to younger people. Like one of the things that's happened now, a number of people who are young, in their 20s, early 20s, joined or became associated with PAN in Dublin. And they convinced the president of Trinity College Students' Union to come out in favour of neutrality. This is what just happened, right? Mm-hmm. And they put up the resolution, the Union Students of Ireland, to come out in favour of neutrality. And it did, right? So formally now, as we're sitting here, for the first time ever, the Union Students of Ireland supports Irish neutrality. Now that didn't happen because of me, believe you me, I'm not a member of the Students' Union. Because a small number of young people decided, they heard about PAN, right? They got in touch with us, we had a chat, and they went off and did their thing, nothing to do with us. Like, I had no role whatsoever in convincing the Irish Students' Union to come out and figure out. So you need people to make up their own mind, stop waiting around for me or somebody else to suggest what they can do. They can talk to us, but it's up to other people, you know? I mean, I have sons that are young, but I don't really know that many young people, you know, not surprisingly, you know, why would I, like, you know? So it really is up to people, individual people deciding this is what we're going to do and make it an issue. And but know what you're up against. You're up, it's hard to, you know, I always think, you ever heard the phrase, waiting in the long grass?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, imperialism was defeated in 1918, right? As the War of Independence, I thought. Okay, they stayed in power in the north, the Unionists did. But the home rulers were defeated, they were crushed, they faded away. And for decades, the state in the south was definitely in favour of Irish neutrality. There's no question about that, right? Very powerful feeling. So powerful that they didn't even put it into the constitution because so many people, I mean, what, not just Fianna Fáil, Fianna Gael, you know, everybody, barring a tiny number of people. Well, what they did was the people in favour of who hate Irish independence and want us to be part of an empire, like the Irish Times, they knew it would be difficult to convince Ireland to rejoin Britain. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a group, apparently a group had now been formed to do that, by the way.
Yeah, and that's great.
So they thought, well, let's have a European, maybe we join a European empire. And so essentially, they were waiting in the long grass for their time to come again. this is it. This is the time we can move on and come back to civilization and, you know, tolerance and all this sort of carry on, and kill large numbers of people. You know what I mean? And maybe we killed ourselves. But
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it'd just be interesting in regards to the question on sports. Obviously, at the moment, in World Affairs, there's the talk of sanctions and all that type of stuff. So it'd just be interesting in regards to what the panels do in regards to sanctions tying with Irish neutrality. But I think in regards to the stuff you're talking in regards to obviously Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael banging the NATO drum and all that type of stuff, and thinking that Ireland has this militarily role that we're destined to achieve or be part of in regards to what the Western Hemisphere. I think in regards to the UN Security Council, I think as soon as Ireland's gone on there, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, with the Greens, they've got this notion in their head that Ireland should be part of that bubble, and that's where we've been missing out and we should be belong to as such. But in my own personal view, I find yours, I think Ireland moving forward with the discussion for Ireland's future. If not, is that Ireland should be, in regards to world affairs, obviously using Irish neutrality, but to be that mediator where there is conflict resolution, to be in instances here where Russia, Ukraine, or Russia and NATO, in regards to there's no good guy on either side. Obviously you've got elements within Ukraine of a large distinctions of militias who are fascist in regards to their own notion, but for Ireland through the UN Security Council to be that mediator in regards to getting people to sit down, bang their heads together as such, and trying to negotiate peace agreements and use our own experience in regards to conflict as that vacuum of moving forward. But it just obviously be questions are to probably that view there in regards to whether is that the view of panic in regards to what Ireland's capacity should be in the global sphere, and also in regards to views in regards to sanctions, how they plan it.
Well, PANA wouldn't be in favour of sanctions on either side, right? What we put forward is a situation of arguing that there should be a process of negotiations to try and ease down the situation. If you simultaneously say you only want sanctions, if you apply to one side, you wouldn't be accepted as any kind of mediator. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't be saying, well, you know, you didn't have any problems killing hundreds of thousands of Americans, killing hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq. Or in the case of, I think virtually every country in Europe bombed the hell out of Libya. You know what I mean? Western countries. I think Germany didn't actually. But most of the others did. Yeah. You know what I mean?
France and Italy, certainly.
France and Britain were the two lads who got involved. But they had a lot of small. You know. So you can't act as a mediator if you simultaneously only want sanctions to apply to one side, because that side, well, you're not an independent group. You know. But I mean, the problem, that's not the core problem. The core problem is what processes can you use to argue your case and actually be heard. Like what has happened, for example, is that RTE, we would send out a press statement once a month maybe. That's not too much. Not just for the hell of it, there would actually have to be some sort of issue, right? What RTE has done is stopped any emails with press statements coming into them from PANA, right? That's where we're at, right? They won't do it. So you can't contact RTE with an email from PANA any longer. They won't. You know where you can unsubscribe, right? Well, they've unsubscribed PANA. Well, they not only will they not have us on RTE, you know. I'm not going to argue about that, because I'm not trying to pretend PANA. But I mean, it would be the best people who know more about neutrality than most people. But that's what they do. And for some reason or other, God knows how all this happens, we decided to change strategy and write letters. Right? So you have letters from PANA being published, as is pointed out to me, in the Belfast, in the newsletter. Right? In the newsletter.
And the Irish News as well.
And the Irish News. You know what I mean? And the Irish Times. And believe it or not, the Daily Mail has published every letter that we've sent in. I don't know. But that's, so we're getting letters in, right, about the whole issue. I suppose they cost think, well, maybe we should have some talk about people who don't want to die into our newspaper columns rather than those people who do. And big development was Vincent O'Toole, who was a well-known journalist columnist in the Irish Times. He's freelance, he writes for other publications as well. And last Saturday I thought he'd just do the usual, you know what I mean? Because he's always attacking Sinn Féin, you know, so I thought, well, he wouldn't be defending neutrality either. But no, far from it. He said he actually came, he wrote a sizable article saying, Putin bad, you know, but he isn't that bad. He has problems about these missiles being placed up against his border, the way Kennedy did, right? And we should see if we can find a settlement, and we should support neutrality. Now that was another something that happened out of, I don't know, maybe he's better than I thought he was, you know. Because I debated the issue of the European Union, the militarization of the European Union years ago. I think that's, you know, we spent years trying to establish a PAN branch in Northern Ireland, right? And there's a lot of different groups affiliated to PAN, right? Including Sinn Féin, they affiliated to us in 1996. They still have to appoint somebody who attends our NEC meetings, mind you. Okay. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nod, nod. If anybody knows anybody in Sinn Féin, maybe you should just suggest to them that they actually appoint a person who comes to our NEC meetings. I don't know if anybody knows anybody in Sinn Féin here, but if there is, they could suggest that to the leadership that this wouldn't be a bad idea. So there was at least an element of dialogue. They might suggest that maybe they meet us occasionally. That would be another good idea. You know what I mean?
It's interesting that the conversation seems to keep sort of coming back to the media and the lack of coverage of issues like this. You know, the narrative that's been given over the last few days is, you know, very much one-sided. Personally, I think we're moving into very, very dangerous territory with the media. If you look at the situation with Julian Assange and his treatment for his exposure of American war crimes, American imperialism, and what's being done to him, that's designed to send a very clear message to people. Toe the line. Don't step out of line. Don't print anything out of line. Don't say anything out of line. So how do we begin to overcome that? I mean, money. They have endless resources, and they're blocking the other point of view getting out. And I really think it's coming to very, very dangerous territory.
Yeah. One thing is the number of people buying newspapers is going down. It's not going up. You know, I mean, when I was younger, for quite some time, even when I wasn't that young, I couldn't not buy the Irish Times. It was like, you know, I mean, my father was a Fianna Fáil man, right? So the Sunday Independent never entered the house, right? The Independent never did. But we buy the Sunday Press. But during, you know, all the other time we buy the thing. And engaged me, I don't know if you heard of him, but he was an editor. And he was, you know, a bit of a Republican, not bad, so you enjoy it. But for the last couple of years, it's just gone really, really bad. And joined the ranks. And funny enough, I think the independent group of newspapers is now owned by a German firm. So maybe that's why they publish letters from the Sarner, sell more copies of it. So there's things going on. It's not, I don't think the media is like, you know, ruled by, you know, Mr. God up there. You know, there are definitely divisions within the media. And obviously quite a lot of we're Facebook friends and we tic-tac with each other every now and then. You know what I mean? So and social media, I mean, who is obviously that's obviously happening. Sinn Féin do huge, very, very good stuff. You know, and other progressive parties do very good stuff on social media. So there are ways of this is, you know, people know this, you know, we're just going to have a new website, right? One of the advantages of COVID, we couldn't do very much. So we had more money. So we're going to have, you know, a much more up-to-date, modern website. Hopefully that'll help. So, you know, talking to influential people who are involved in the progressive trade union movement looking for United Ireland, you know, suggesting that maybe they could have, as you just said, have an article in the next publication about neutrality. So, you know, because, you know, it would make a United Ireland much easier if you didn't have the military expenditure that is now paid for by the British Empire. Yeah. And you can have, you know, things like a proper health and all Ireland good NHS. You know what I mean? Because you have more money to spend on. So it's directly connected to that. But you know, the current situation is far more real. You know, this is a conflict between the Russians backed by the Chinese against the Americans and their vessels. And this is a global, it's just like 1914. It's a big conflict between two major imperial blocs. And our ruling class have decided, as they did in 1914, to support one side, right? It's a kind of repeat of 1914. So when you had your image, neither King nor Kaiser Ireland, neither Russia nor NATO, I mean, and argue a situation that as a small country, we don't have enemies and therefore we could maybe play a role, you know what I mean? But at least don't back either side. I mean, that was the core argument upon me.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's gone away because they have a problem. 82% of Irish people in the Republic of Ireland, if they're asked, they want to stay neutral. So you just need more of these meetings, better attended and better well-known speakers. You know what I mean? There's lots of people who are better known. Maybe probably more sure there are. So.
Anyone else? Any other points to this?
Well, I just want to make a suggestion, a couple of practical things that I didn't know that Man United were playing tonight, are they?
Yeah.
Did you know that, Roger?
There's parent-teacher meetings all as well, because that's where all Martin isn't here.
I'm not a soccer man, but apparently, that's probably impacted as well because there's a couple of young guys downstairs who come to everything here, and they said, "Is he coming up?" And they said, "Fuck, sorry, Flash, it's United's fucking on the TV." Me and Sienna didn't know it, right? So we'll have to check the football fixtures next time. But a couple of practical things. I mean, we can, along with yourself, obviously, we could approach, for example, Ireland's Future, the people involved in organising those events and that programme of events.
It would be good to do a Zoom with Ogra because I think the young people are ultimately going to be what changes the future and what demand that neutrality does stay in a New Ireland. And I think that, now that we have Zoom, that you don't need to go to packed halls, it's a great way of reaching people, in a mass manner, and they seem to be very well organised.
But
does that go anywhere? That recording?
Yeah, it will be on YouTube and on our website, so we can
a lot more people will see it and listen to it and watch it. But I'll take that for yourself. We can approach the organisers of Ireland Future and ask that you or someone like you in this issue is included in some future discussions.
This issue of neutrality should be placed like centre stage in terms of any of the sort of discussions and debates in around what a new Ireland's going to look like.
Yeah. Same with the trade union group. Again, you've mentioned Sinn Féin, but the Workers' Party people, I think you were recently the president, right? So you're the president of the Workers' Party of Ireland here. So, there's a lot of obviously dots to be connected here, right? I'm glad that you said about the new website because obviously social media is so important in this day and age, and particularly when the media obviously excludes voices like yourself. That's great to hear that's the case. So there's a couple of practical things that we can do coming off the back of this, and at least try and connect yous up to some of the debates that are now on. But you're right, I've been involved in those discussions about the trade union group, and it has never ever been mentioned. Nobody would even think
it's taken for granted, but it's taken for granted, and you should never do that with anything, obviously. But whenever you talk, you think of a new Ireland. It's a non-aligned Ireland. It's an Ireland that's not going to be hooked into any of the major.
Before you go on, what do you think will happen if a government, if a southern government, and let's imagine that Sinn Féin was a government in the south and had a Taoiseach, and what do you think would happen if they said no more US troops in Shannon? What do you think is likely to? What's the likely response of the US to that debate?
Well, just to be clear, I'm personally a member of Sinn Féin, right? And so just bear that in mind when I'm answering this question, because I'm a relatively new member, but I've known lots of people in Sinn Féin, because Sinn Féin affiliated to PAN in 1996, so I've been to rakes of Sinn Féin Irish over the years. Just walk around, not voting, just listening. And my concern is that if Sinn Féin does get into government, that's not an unreasonable possibility. This is assuming we're not all dead, right? There's no nuclear war. Let's be a little bit optimistic. What happened when Fianna Fáil got into power in 1932? He was coming from a culture where neutrality, as I said in the document, was an absolute key part of the then Republican movement in the broadest sense, right? I mean, I don't think I want to go on about the Civil War, because at the end of the day, while they disagreed how to get there, both Collins and De Valera wanted a united Irish Republic. Obviously, they didn't agree how to get there, but nevertheless, that's not now the division. The division is between all those people from wherever they came on the Republican side who want a united Irish Republic, and those people who want to be at the very best a region of an emerging EU empire. Because we don't actually, PAN doesn't advocate leaving the European Union. It just says we don't want to be part of your army. And you can do that, because Denmark is in the European Union. It's not a member. They had a referendum, and the people in Denmark voted against it, and then they've tried to change their mind. They've got a number of protocols, including the one we don't get involved in your military expenditure. So we could happily stay in the European Union and not be part of their army. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't stop the French and German forming a European army. They're separate sovereign states, and they could do what they like. But we're perfectly entitled not to join it, if we so wish. You know, if they are, that's what the Irish people want, and that's absolutely an option. And in debates about neutrality, because I know there's a lot of argument. The people who support the British Army got a bit confused with the protocol, and they couldn't handle it, and they're all over the second joint, right? Because there's three loyalties. There's a loyalty to United Ireland, there's a loyalty to the British Empire, and there's a loyalty to this EU, which is a lot of people still think is a peace project. Not if you look at the figures, but that's what the thought was. So you have a more complex situation, but I think you have to go back to the roots of the actual national struggle for independence, when it began with Connolly establishing the Irish Neutrality League and forming an alliance with the Fenians, and having the Rising and the War of Independence and all that flew from it. That's a starting point really you have to have, because when De Valera and power and all that, and even Fine Gael, Fine Gael were in favour of neutrality as well. It wasn't just Fianna Fáil, it was right across the board, right? The Labour Party was in favour of neutrality. It was very, very powerful for a long, long time. And the people who get the €1 million a year, they have to put a lot of effort into changing their mind, you know what I mean, and using their influence and power. But by and large, born again Revendites have more money than we have, But we have to respond. There has to be an organisation that you're in that does talk about it, right? That says this is actually central to establishing the kind of Irish Republic that you want. You can't just ignore it, and especially since John Doyle's paper making it clear that there's a good financial reason for being in favour of Irish United. So I'm barring no nuclear war, I'm actually fairly positive, right? Which is a big bar, I would say. But nevertheless, you can, I think it's quite strong. We just have to organise it, right? You have to have a functioning, and that's up to you lads. I don't mean if I were telling you something to say, look, maybe there should be a proper, Belfast group. You know what I mean? That formal group, but something. And what better place that's named after James Connolly? There's one person in Irish history who supported Irish neutrality, it's Connolly.
There's another question.
Must embrace neutrality. And I think neutrality would be a big seller for people who want to unite Ireland with people with a new identity. not one that's in the bog or somewhere else or whatever the case may be. And I remember I'm getting to even, I buried the hatchet, but I marked the spot. It shouldn't be marked. If you're burying the hatchet, don't be making any road maps.
Okay. There's not a lot
I
to
was
say.
talking to ice picks earlier on with the beard, you know, so maybe it's become fashionable.
Well, there's a very practical suggestion that Roger's made for us all to think about forming, you know, a branch or, you know, that would support the work of PANA.
Yeah, some sort of.
Let's have a think about that going forward, how we may do that and keep this debate going, you know.
Definitely.
And there is a lot of, you know, take it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not stopping anybody not giving a donation to PANA, but they are, you know, there's badges there as well.
Yeah.
Is Belfast a badge culture?
Oh yeah, I think there's probably badge collectors.
But nobody-
badge collectors here.
Nobody
Everybody's-
wears badges in Dublin really very much,
Ah, well,
apart from the volume.
Apart from Morgan.
Can I just ask one thing before we go? Are you going to, will there be a demonstration or will there be any kind of, in the case that there is a war breaks out,
Yeah.
what's
Any
the
sort of
plan? Is there going to be?
mobilisation?
Well, if a war breaks out, there might not be any point in having a demo. See, it's different in 1916. They didn't have nuclear weapons then,
Yeah.
right? So, you know, if it breaks out, we're all fucked, with all
Yeah.
due respect. Sorry for language. But yes, there is one tomorrow. I'm speaking at it, outside the door. Saying, you know, I'm doing it with the trots, which I, you know, work with, right?
Yeah.
You know, put it like that.
Have they organised it, or and you're participating, Roger, or is it who's organising?
No, it's a group called the Irish Anti-War Movement.
Right. Okay.
But some of them aren't, and some of them are.
Yeah, there'd be all sorts of.
I much prefer
Same as Brent.
I much prefer Farrow down Galway, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So go ahead.
But nevertheless, see, if you're going abroad, you have to work with everybody. You can't just. I don't
Absolutely.
like.
No,
I don't like the cut of his.
100%.
I don't like the cut of his beard. You can't say that. You have to work.
Go ahead, Don.
Just a few observations. I'm a Belfast man long ago, but I've spent most of my life, fortunately or unfortunately, in Dublin and observed the scene there. There are 3 points I'd just make about the neutrality thing. You can look at it from the point of view of principle, of social self-interest and personally. And what I mean by that is, on the principle side, clearly, the use of Shannon, whereby troops are coming in from the United States, soldiers, weapons. In the past they've gone to Afghanistan, they've gone to Iraq, and they're now going on to Eastern Europe. And we know a lot of the things that have been done in those countries, which would be a matter of deep shame for anybody with any self-respect. And then there's another level, which of course is the social self-interest, whereby there was a time, but fortunately it didn't come to pass, where some people in the south were worried that by virtue of the use of Shannon, that the Islamic fundamentalists might decide to plant bombs in the Republic. In fact, they didn't do so. Now, part of that was because they were using it as the base to get over to Britain, but it didn't happen. But there's a third dimension to it, and I noticed this with some relatives of mine in Dublin, who are much younger than I am, but still have children grown up now, young adults. And there's one in particular I was talking to about this whole neutrality thing, who's not very political, never was, maybe never will be, but was adamant that she would not in any way support any departure in neutrality. And it was very basic. She doesn't want to see her children coming back in body bags from Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, or anywhere else. And I think that that latter point, it's not to be regarded as entirely selfish, it's understandably human, as a parent would look at it, has been a very powerful factor in being the base of the statistic that Roger earlier quoted about the 80% plus of the people who are for neutrality. So I think those are the three levels. There's the principle, which of course is there and should be addressed and should be kept in mind and should be propagated. There is secondly just like during the Second World War, whatever you thought about Nazism and fascism, I mean, for us to have declared war in Germany would have meant it wouldn't have been a few accidental bombs in the North Strand from the Luftwaffe, it would have been a complete obliteration, and that was, I think, a legitimate. I'd go against this whole ultra-leftist tendency to say we should have declared war in Germany. But there is the third and the final factor. We don't want our children coming back in body bags. And I think that's a powerful factor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Roger, for
All right, thank you.
following up.